Good afternoon. Or close to it, anyway. You know how sometimes you read things, and some things just you read it for. I like to read just for entertainment and just the exercise. I like moving my eyes. I like connecting my eyes to my brain. Anyway, I like reading. But once in a while, you come across something that sticks with you over the years. And one of the books, small book that I read that seems really appropriate now, and I'll talk about today, was called Tipping Point. Tipping Point is sort of like a teeter-totter. Those of you, most people are very familiar because it's become part of the nomenclature, part of the used vocabulary, that shared vocabulary that we have now, tipping point. So it's like a teeter-totter or a fulcrum. Imagine that this was on top of this. Imagine I had a triangle and this is balanced. And if you put weight on it, on either side, it goes up and down. That's why two children would sit on opposite sides of this and just teeter-totter. Push and push and push. But sometimes in the natural condition, it's a physical law that enough information becomes available that it becomes part of the commonality, part of the greater consciousness of people. And it was written as a warning that we're at a tipping point in history. Historically, we're at a tipping point. And of course, we can go. That's the beauty of this. And the tipping point that is most in the news right now is this, with the all these conferences we've had for climate, all these hollow, empty. It really hasn't sunk home how finite, what a limited resource, an irreplaceable limited resource Mother Earth is. And without her, we're goners. We're history. She'll be fine. She'd be fine without us. In fact, she might be, those would argue, I would be amongst them, argue that she'd be better off without us. So I'm not overly concerned about the fate of humanity. But I am an optimist at heart. Okay? And one of the, it's easy to see all the bad. And I was talking last night with my good friend Buffalo, my Taiwanese friend, my contemporary, similar ages, that we've reached a tipping point, that the bad is so easy to, the bad was so easy to see, the division. Both here in Taiwan, there's a very divisive society, not quite as great as my country, America. I shouldn't claim that. This is my previous country. Taiwan is my home now. But the schism, the division is so huge. And if you look at much, it looks like it's all going this way. And I want to couple this with some things that have been happening to me in my practice, my meditation, my dreams, my being. Very specific numbers have been coming to me, and I talked about 1/10,000th of the population, 78,000 awakened beings on the planet at this time. I talked about 1/100th of the population, about 780 million people that are suitable, are ready, are available, are interested, are committed to those 7,800 awakened beings. It was 100 each. But many people that have awakened choose not to, I don't know, I don't really know the proportion, but many who have awakened have chosen not to pass it on, not to let it be known. Those who say, don't know, those And those that know don't say. But it's time for us to speak up. And one of my favorite resources in social media resources is Quora. It's a forum. There's several people that I really like that I've followed on Quora. And there's one in particular that kind of led me to this. And before I go much further into the tipping point, I'd like to just read, if you'll bear with me, just read again what I've read recently, if I can find it. I should have prepared this. Something about the tipping point. And I'm not going to be able to find it off the top of my head unless this is it. Okay, here she is. Now this is somebody called Rashika Anya. It sounds like another, she looks, a blonde lady. She looks like she's another that's adopted some kind of Hindu name, which is fine. I've adopted a Chinese name. Hai Yang is my Chinese name, Ocean. And I use it almost exclusively. I feel comfortable with it. It's my name now. Anyway, so more power to Rishika Anya. Okay. Now the question was asked on Quora, and which I'm talking about today, the tipping point. We're either going to go bad or good. When I say good, it sounds judgmental, but we're either going to awaken or we're going to perish. It's that critical. We're right at the point that we have a choice to support awakening, to pursue our own personal path to awakening, to seek out other like-minded souls and share amongst each other, or just hell in a handbasket. And Mother Earth doesn't really care. She's not really vested in us, you know. We're unique on her surface now that we have the ability to choose. With everything else, you know, nature doesn't get to choose. It'll just follow. If Earth turns into a hot, fiery ball, which has been in the past, and all life as we know it, water, trees, all the beautiful things in life will perish. But Mother Earth herself will be fine. She's been there before. She's been a ball of fire. She's been a rock of ice. She's been a verdant supporter of life, both from her seas, her oceans, and from her, the flora and the fauna have just excelled. It's just, and it'll come again. All things come and all things go. So the question was, is the world going through an awakening? I believe it is. And I believe it is spurred in part because humanity as a whole, organism, understands that it's approaching a tipping point. Remember, this is what I'm talking about. Beyond which the planet will become uninhabitable by us. It's wake up or die time. Yeah, I didn't put it so dramatically, but wake up or die time. There have long been awakened advanced spiritual beings on the planet, but they have hidden themselves. And some obvious exceptions, like Jesus and Buddha, only recently has it become more acceptable to discuss in spiritual matters outside of a structured religious setting, with the result that we have been able to acknowledge and safely explore new interpretations of our reality and what it means to be human. Thus, it is also more possible than ever for awakening to be transmitted. Yes, more possible now than ever. Each of us also, thus it is also more possible than ever for, I'm sorry, I see him squinting with one eye. Give me a second and let's make this print bigger. Okay, let's make it bigger. Okay, now that'll be easier for me to read. Sorry, I should start over, but I don't want to. I like rings and warts and imperfections. I welcome that. This is not rehearsed. It's not scripted. It's spontaneous, and I like. That's one of the things I think that I bring to the table when I'm in this format. Okay. Only recently it's become more acceptable to discuss spiritual matters outside of a structured religious setting. I know I'm repeating myself. With the result that now we are able to acknowledge and safely explore new interpretations of our reality and what it means to be human. Thus, it is also more possible than ever for awakening to be transmitted. Okay, hear that? Good news. Each of us is a facet of the one consciousness. We only appear to be separated by individual bodies. So when one of us awakens, it has a ripple effect, and we start to trigger each other. I think this is her. I even think that the current Pope may be an awakened individual based on his language. If that's interesting, isn't it? If we're lucky, enough of us will wake up to rescue our ecosystem before it's too late. Enough of us. Let's wake up. Come on, it's time. She's calling for it. Of course, with awakening comes self-purification and its attendant ego resistance, which you can easily see in the political upheaval in the U.S. right now. Those who would cling fearfully to the pre-awakened state, to the illusions of separation, status, wealth, and power, are adjusting with the new reality of interdependence, love, and the unity of consciousness. Awakening means to see ourselves as the whole, with humility. The moment I understood that you are also me, how can I harm you, whether you're another person or another country? How can I not share my stuff that I've hoarded? How can I not love you love you as myself? Ego hates this. It thinks, how do I give up the satisfaction of comparing my lifestyle, heritage, body, home, culture, and accomplishments to yours? How will I know who I am? What will I do if I don't compete? How can I be safe? It's as difficult and as sacred a struggle for a society as for a person. Will the whole world wake up in time? Good question. Will the whole world wake up in time? I believe so. But as with any awakening individual, we're all going to go through the challenging, necessary process of looking directly at our darkness in order to heal. And things are going to be very messy for a while. So I had to close one eye. Maybe I need a new prescription. Anyway, that's Rushika Anya. I thank you, Rushika, because I've been liking to find other people's words to say what I've been saying. And because I just appreciate that other people are seeing things a similar way. Not that it validates anything that I've seen, because I have no hesitation, no doubt about the message that I'm giving in this. But I do have the caveat that Indeed, this is my experience of this message. So it's fun to read somebody else, and I hope that you could stick with that, because it was really good. Okay, and she talked about the tipping point and all the things that I wanted to talk about today. And what's been happening for me is I discovered this message yesterday, after I had already. My process is in preparing. The only preparation I do of these sharings is I'm gifted a title. It just comes to me. Inspired, blessed, dream, all kinds of... The world is unlimited resources after all. And things come to me and I just say, aha, I catch on something, and that kind of... And then I try to remember that, try to stay as on point as I can, that this is the message that I'm talking about today. But because of the way my mind works, one thing leads me to another, and I have to make an effort to come back to the central point. And there is hope for me, because I remember the best speaker I've ever seen in the unassuming. Noam Chomsky is this little old man, kind of hunched over. He's not particularly charismatic or he's not charismatic at all. He's just hypnotizing in his use of the language. He is a linguist, after all, among many other things. But his political insight, his insight is just spectacular. So he started on this pretty broad topic, and he rambled for 50 minutes. And unbeknownst to me, his ramblings were with a method. He brought 50 minutes of insightful, inclusive, unlimited knowledge and information. Wow, what a treasure he was, and what an opportunity it was for me to see him speak in person, sit in the front row where he was 10 feet away, and just absorb. But it wasn't until he brought everything so skillfully. It seemed unscripted, totally unscripted. But he brought things so skillfully to a crescendo. He tied in everything that he seemed to be rambling about. All became inclusive, basic, important. I'm struggling for a word, cohesive. He started out right where he had intended. He began here, he went like this, and lo and behold, he ended up exactly where he wanted. Every loose end was tied, no ramblings. You could just see the beauty and the order in his, as I said, unspectacular presence. Except there was a kindness, a gentleness that belied his language, because he's really brutal as far as expressing, but he's soft-spoken. But there was a beauty to his presence of if I had a grandfather alive, man, but I'd love him to be my grandfather. This kind of he was a loving man, a caring, loving, brilliant human being. He is. He's still with us, and he hasn't lost his edge. He hasn't grown conservative, to say the least. He's a radical all the way, and he will be. But he's a dangerous radical in that he's fully armed with an abundance. You know, the range of his knowledge is just almost incomprehensible to me. Taiwan brought all its biggest political who support the, I won't go into politics too much, but kind of the right wing, the part of the KMT, which was a dictatorship by Chiang Kai-shek here for 50, 60, 70 years. And the remnants, they brought their big guns to this talk because he's particularly brutal about their past. their party's affiliation with the criminals and the power grab, and he knows. And so they brought the guns knowing that he's going to try to expose them. They brought their top guns, and I tell you what, when people ask a question and they pontificate, and the question lasts 20 minutes because they're enamored by the sound of their own voice, and they start a question, and I don't know how anybody can ask a question that takes 20 minutes, but these were the pundits, these were the experts, these were the heavy guns that were supposed to expose him as a fraudulent, as a little man that didn't know anything. And one by one, in the kindest, most orderly way, he knew more about them and their history than they knew combined. And he would quote, and he would give the year and the time and the participants. And that one time they talked about, what about this paper tigers? What about the small Asian countries that have, become so powerful? And he just looked at them straight in the eye and says, you could never have accomplished this without the aid of America. And all these people are pro-China now anyway, these heavyweights from that particular... it's ironic that their leader, their founder their leader was very anti-communist, but now they've embraced the communists, and China is their holy grail. They're holding up China as the power. And for him to just look them in the eye and say, yeah, it's great, but it was all made possible by America. And then he starts telling you, boom, 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 industry, and this, and this, and this, and this. And he just demolished. You watched a bunch of windbags just getting deflated, it was great. But I'm sharing all of this because I think it's particularly cogent. I believe that he's an awakened being, and he's bringing his message to them where it hurts. He's exposing their own ignorance. He's exposing their own hubris, their own self-inflated, self-important view of history, that they only look at history in terms of how it supports their position and how it favors their founders and their leaders, and they just got exposed. And it's just one of the most powerful experiences in my life. And his gift was, first of all, the scope of wisdom, and scope of knowledge, and scope of information is just incredible. He knows more about everything than anybody. How does it fit in that fascinating brain of this little hunched over, soft-spoken little man? But his words carry such weight and such power, devastating to his foes. They left exposed. That's their worst fear, that they'll be exposed. But that's his calling. So this tipping point, he's cutting them down at the knees. I don't want to deal with them. I'm not interested in politics, but I do follow as an amateur political scientist. I'm interested in power, and I'm interested in how people abuse the power, and I'm interested in the division and separation that's enhanced, encouraged. I just saw an interesting little tidbit about J.P. Morgan, one of the titans of the late 19th century, early 20th century. Big banker, J.P. Morgan. He said, we need a compliant workforce. That's all we are to these movers and shakers. Today's high-tech guys need a compliant workforce. Their biggest fear is to be exposed like Noam Chomsky's been devoting his whole life to exposing the emperor has no clothes. But just that one line, we need a compliant workers. Non-questioning. God forbid there's some soul searching, some personal inclination and interest in improving one's own spiritual being. I read this morning that beautiful, only love can replace fear. So through the word, my favorite man who's doing this now, Dalai Lama does it in his way, but Thich Nhat Hanh, the little Vietnamese 94, 95, 96, 97-year-old monk who's in the end of his days, accepted back to Vietnam, who has plum villages, his little ashrams, his little centers, biggest one being in somewhere in France. He's just the epitome, as is Dalai Lama, of love and kindness. And this is the only thing that will ultimately bring the downfall of the fear mongers, the people that promote fear to keep division. Divide and conquer, as the old saying goes, right? Yeah. This is the biggest threat. Love is the biggest threat to people who only understand the utility of instilling fear in the people, in its people. Only through fear. And the only solution, the only way to combat fear is love. And this is the only thing they're afraid of. In fact, they're not even aware enough to know. They can just feel an inkling. They feel this tipping point too. Something's changing. And what she say at the end of this article? Things are going to be very messy for a while. Well, for some of us, nothing messy for me. I got clarity, and clarity was my purpose. And my purpose is to do what I'm doing right this minute. That's my purpose for this minute, for this moment. But this tipping point means, will include, it's either going one way or the other. And as I said, I'm optimistic, and I'm sure it's going to more and more people awake. And I go, let me catch something that I started talking about why I'm getting specific numbers. And why all of a sudden it's so specific. And I'm waiting now. I'm sure there's going to be more of this kind of mathematical information. I just feel it. And the next thing I feel coming is some kind of formula for the quickening pace of personal awakening. How that 7,800 fully awakened beings abiding in permanent awakening, how that number will increase, in what kind of exponential rate. And this is it's not time to keep your cards close to your vest. It's time to share. I share everything that I can. And it's not up to me to worry at all about, I'm not a worry in the world, but to worry about how it'll be interpreted, how it'll be judged. Who cares? Yeah, but I feel like it's important. It's incumbent on those that have awakened to share. They can. No awakened person can magically touch you on the shoulder and say you're awakened now. I remember my last teacher that I had before I woke that took me to the precipice and said jump, and then turned his back and walked away because his job as a teacher was done. We take you to the edge. But we can't carry you. You lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. You have to do the work. You carry the burden. You're the one that jump. You're the one that conquers your fear. You're the one that notices the hollowness of your ego that supports only division and separation. When you learn in your heart, you feel it in your very being that it's all unified. You are, I am you and you are me. But this has to be on an individual level. So again, a master, somebody that's awakened can't just touch you. Because my teacher told me, hey, don't you think that his awakening had occurred 26 years? He'd been at it for a while. He's a very mature Buddha in his Buddhahood. 26 years into his 26 times 6. I won't even do the math. I remember 160 years old. According to my formula. 6 years, 6 Buddha years to every 1 human year. But anyway, he said, hey, if it was so simple, who do you think I would tap on the shoulder and waken first? It's my Tai, my wife. She's been through with this with me forever. She's put up with me on my spiritual journey and building this group that I've built, or we've built. She had to tolerate a lot. She had to put up with my temper sometimes. This is him speaking, because he does have a temper. He has a personality. Despite, I told you, you wake up but you retain a personality. He said, don't you think, who do you think, if I had this power, if anyone had this power, who do you think I'd awaken first? Of course, the woman that's closest to me in my life. My partner in this life, my wife. Of course, and she's not awake. And I can't judge. I don't know where she is on her journey. But she's certainly been close enough to a living example that some of it, osmosis, some of it had to rub off. Who knows? Time will tell. But we need more of this. We need more of you. We need more of this, looking for a name again. Rashika Anya. We need more Rashikas, more Anyas that are willing to just stand up and say, hey, here's what I know to be so. And it all boils down to there's nothing that you can do. You can't do anything to become a being, a spiritual awakened person. There's nothing that you can do because it's not doing. We're not human doings. We're human beings. So only by being, by seeing the unity, by filling your heart with love and compassion for all, by living in our given, God-given right state of mind is joy. To be joyful, full of joy. To illustrate, to walk in the light, to share when you have an opportunity to share.